We have a fantastic guest lined up for you now, and it's particularly talking about food waste and how we can try and curtail our food waste, which a lot of us still waste an awful lot of food these days, don't we? Well, it's my pleasure to introduce you to a gentleman called Alessandro Vitale. He is an Italian tattoo artist who's turned his urban home in London into a thriving urban garden. Comes from a small town in regional Italy. Inspired by his grandpa, he's created an oasis to help reconnect with nature. Now today, he's known also as the Spicy Moustache. He's built a successful social media channel as well as launching his own line of chili seeds, all while maintaining this amazing garden. And in 2021, Alessandro was able to grow enough fruit and vegetables from his urban garden to predominantly sustain him and his partner for several months, which is incredible, isn't it? Right in the heart of London. So today, Alessandro is going to give us some great tips on reducing our food waste and also starting our own urban gardens, even with a little windowsill box. Before we meet him properly, a little video of him to show us what he's up to at home.
I'm Alessandro, I'm 30, I come from North Italy in a small town between Rome and Venice, and I've been in London for roughly 7 years. Growing up in Italy, I was always in touch with my grandpa. We used to do lots of things together, and he taught me a lot of different things, including gardening. And he had a small garden in the town, so a sort of urban garden. And when I moved to London, basically I felt the need to find an area for myself that was submerged in nature and disconnected from the routine, from the reality, let's say. So I decided to create first a balcony with a few plants, and then I moved to a bigger garden with lots of different plants and a great biodiversity to grow my own food. Gardening is my main passion because it's great to start a seed, and in the end you're gonna harvest your own food. You can literally do this anywhere in the world. You don't need specific instructions or skills. Anyone can do this, and this is exactly the reason why I'm super into it. I really love it, and also I would love to connect more people through gardening. So what I'm trying to do, for example, in my front yard, I converted it into a vegetable garden, so I can help the neighbors to transform their own as well, and also give them, free food, because I don't sell any of my produce, but I give it away for free. And my main goal would be one day to teach and have my own lessons on how to garden, how to make your own food in either a small space, a big space, or whatever space you have available. Everyone can make their own produce, everyone can eat organic, healthy, and not relying on supermarkets that they produce food that is full of chemicals and really bad for our body. The way we're living, especially in the modern society, we feel this missing link with nature. All the times that we feel depressed or we have these kind of feelings is because we are no longer connected with nature. And the best way to do this is to create your own space and grow your own food in a way that it's organic and it's not dangerous for your body, and is gonna help you to live in a sustainable way. Roughly in 2015, I started having my first growing space. As I mentioned, it was just a growing space on a balcony, so a really restricted space, but still I managed to grow a lot of food, and I learned a lot by trial and error, and luckily I managed to move to a bigger space. It took me about 3 years to set up the actual space that I have now, because every year I'm adding up, I'm changing things, and I can't wait for the next season to plant something else, something different, and grow new things in the garden. So in the garden, what I'm trying to do is to apply different techniques, including permaculture and natural farming, but the whole point is to reduce the waste and use a closed circle technique. So it basically means that I don't have any sort of wastage. whenever the plant it's finished from producing, whenever I harvest like all the fruit from a plant, I can then chop it down into pieces and feed it to the worms because I have a worm bin, or I could put it into the compost and transform it into new nutrients that I can then apply into the garden. And so this cycle keeps going on, and it's sort of reproducing the natural cycle. So trying to work along with nature, work in the same way that nature does in the natural environment. Right now in my garden I'm growing a few different things, including varieties of tomatoes and cucumbers and different herbs, chilies, because I'm really passionate about chilies. That's the way I started gardening. And also I've got different courgettes, aubergines, corn, and they're all heirloom seeds, which means they're all kind of rare variety of seeds which are not hybridized. They are sort of pure seeds. And this is a thing that I highly recommend to everyone, to not source hybrid seeds, but to try and source heirloom varieties and save your own seeds. In my backyard, I grow different kind of things using a lot of different techniques, but all organic. I don't use any sort of chemical, pesticide or fertilizer. And I try to condense as many fruit and vegetables in a small space as I can, the more I can. So basically, you could potentially use square foot gardening to grow different kind of vegetables in a really restricted space, or there are other techniques that you could apply to actually harvest your food. In my garden, for example, I grow a variety of different things, and the cool thing that I managed through the vertical spaces and through my greenhouse to grow a lot of food in a really condensed area. It's just an 8 by 5 meters, but I still managed in full production during the summer to produce around 50% of my total amount of vegetables that I have available throughout the season. And everything is organic, and it's absolutely easy to do so. It just requires a bit of work and planning, but anyone can do it, and this is exactly why I'm trying to teach people how to do this. In the garden I made a different kind of DIY project using recycled items. So for example, you could use plastic bottles to create a really cool vertical garden, and you could grow strawberries or many other kind of different things. I also used unused wood, parquet, from a house down the road, and I created a bench where people can sit. Potentially I used bricks from a house on the other side of the street to create a fire pit and to create the border of one of the raised beds. So there are many ways to use materials and recycle. You just need to reinvent yourself and create something that gives a bit of a unique character to your garden. Something that really helped me during my journey of gardening was a book called Jadam, which is basically called KNF as well, which means Korean Natural Farming. It's a way of farming that it's based on what's really available around your area and cheap. So in this way you can grow your own food using not things bought from the supermarket. In most case scenario they claim it as organic but are not. But you can make your own inputs for the garden using just brown sugar and plant material, and or you could potentially use potatoes and other kind of things that could be introduced into your garden to improve the soil web or to make your plants more vigorous and resistant to pests and disease. The issue whenever you go to the supermarket and you buy vegetables or produce made by big companies, first of all, it's these vegetables are full of chemicals, and imagine that a pesticide kills microorganisms, which means we are made as well of microorganisms, and imagine the damage that could do to our body. And also all the packaging around these fruit and vegetables are going to waste, and there are really limited ways to recycle them. So a quick and easy thing to fix it, even on a balcony, on a windowsill or on your backyard, you could transform it and create even if it's just the 5% of your food, the total food that you can eat during a week, is still something, it's still a step forward reducing wastage. My plans for the future are to obviously scale up to a bigger size garden and potentially having a farm with an animal sanctuary and growing food there, but like also having tours of people coming over and helping them to have the whole experience of like harvesting something or growing something from seed. So in this way, people will feel a bit more connected to this and not so distant, like, because right now in this society they feel it like a really distant thing that it's really hard to connect with. But I'm sure that if I'm gonna manage to have my own space, my own homestead, it will be absolutely possible to convert more and more people into this, and eventually, like one day, like start having town flourished with vegetables and different flowers and many ways of creating your own food. My name is Alessandro Vitale, and this is my voice.
Well, it's my pleasure to say we are joined by Alessandro now. Alessandro, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting us have a look around your beautiful garden. We've all been very, very inspired by seeing that video, their beautiful video. And we're also joined, as you can see, by Olympia. Olympia is from the medical services team at Allianz Partners Health. Olympia, I know you have got some fabulous questions for Alessandro, so I shall let you take it away.
Thank you, Emma. And hello, Alessandro. It's absolute pleasure to meet you. And the video was just amazing. Very, very inspiring, I have to say. So thank you for sharing your tips on our food reduction, waste reduction. And I'm very curious, and I'd like to start to ask you, how did you start this journey? How did it start for you? Did you always had a garden as a child, or did you just kind of reinvented it again? Tell us more about it.
Oh yeah, basically, like, I started as a kid with my grandpa teaching me pretty much everything about the living soil and how to nurture plants and grow my own food. So I always been surrounded by plants, nature, and in a way always connected and linked with nature. But I kind of had to, leave it on side, like just because I was dedicating to other things throughout my life, so to my career. And weirdly, I started to do it again, like whenever I moved to London, just because like my first impact to with the city, with London, was to being surrounded with buildings and the whole city is grey and everyone is like focused on their routine. So I really needed to feel like at home again. I really needed to have my corner of nature and being connected and linked with nature again. So I started I started 7 years ago here in London. As I mentioned in the video, in a really so small space on a balcony. And then I felt the need to scale up and move over to a bigger space. And so I got my first urban garden, and since then I moved roughly 5 times until I found this place, and I've been here for 4 years, growing my own food in my backyard.
And why did you decide to share this beautiful passion for gardening online? How did that come in
Yeah,
mind for you?
yeah, that's a great question actually. The reason why I decided to share all this, especially online, is because I really wanted to involve the young generation, and this is why I make my videos super easy, digestible content that everyone can do, like at home, without breaking the bank. They can just, start small and slowly scale up. And this is mainly the main reason why I started doing it online. And the funny thing is, it started like a joke because at first I did like a video talking about beetroots, and I had a great response from the community.
And so since then, I made more and more, and along that, even my videography skills developed.
Oh, that's absolutely nice. I really I watched your videos and they really good and very informative. So I recommend for everyone to watch it. So, like, do you believe that everyone can start a urban garden? Like, is it possible for everyone, or you have to have certain skills?
Well, I believe that like anyone can do it. I think nowadays people are really worried about this thing called green thumb, right? Like they believe that like since I started, I had a big green thumb, and this is why I'm succeeding growing plants. But the result of having such a green thumb is the amount of failures that is behind it, and this is why like over the years, like I learned to uh, develop many skills on gardening because I failed so many times, and still now I kill many plants. But the main advice is don't be scared, don't be afraid of experimenting. Whatever you read online, obviously, you have to consider it as a source of knowledge, not all the times. Uh, but apply this knowledge, but also experiment and try yourself. And this is the best way to learn, and the best way if you want to have an urban garden or any sort of growing space in anywhere.
And how do you say for someone who haven't tried gardening and after watching this video would decide to start urban gardening, what do you need for that to start the garden in the city?
So yeah, like the main advice that I can give is to start small. Just start from a couple of plants and don't overcomplicate it and go over like buying so many plants to add to your garden. I would suggest to start from really simple plants, like could be like herbs or tomatoes and chilies. And then once you have those plants growing in your garden and you master how to nurture them and like make them produce some food, then you can scale up and get something else and so on. And I'm sure after a couple of plants, like that spark in your head is gonna start to light up and you're gonna want more and more to grow more plants.
So, would there be any challenges that you could share that you experienced and you can give some tips to how to overcome those challenges?
Well, yeah, especially in a city, I believe there are lots of challenges because every time you move to a different garden, like it's a different setup, you have building arounds that could shade your garden. So you need to understand the sun rotation over your garden. And so that takes a lot of planning. Planning is an essential thing whenever you are starting to think about like a garden. If you plan it properly, it's going to save so much time on the long run. And for example, for me, like a few challenges that I faced was to not have water directly connected to the garden and living on the first floor. So I had to carry up and down like cans of water or every single day, or not finding wood chips, which are simply logs shredded that you can use in your garden as a source of carbon, for example, in your compost. And so trying to contact the tree surgeon on the road whenever they were coming so I could get some of those wood chips. There are lots of different techniques that you can apply and do, but you will have to learn over time. And again, experimenting is the main thing.
Very good. Very good. That's very interesting. I never experienced urban gardening myself, always had a garden. So it's very interesting to hear, and I'm sure our listeners will appreciate that. So, where, like you mentioned that you can start little with little plants. Would you need like a wood to make raised beds, or I don't know, a specific tools to have it for the garden, or you just I've seen in your video you created in a pots, and would you give some more details on that for someone who is new, who's starting?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, basically you don't need to break the bank and like buy so many things. But for example, recycling, it's an amazing skill that you will develop over time, and it's just about like thinking out of the box and like understanding what could be repurposed and transformed into something valuable that you can reuse into your garden. So like a quick thing that I used to do back in the days was to walk on the main road, and there is always like one of the neighbors that has something to get rid of. That could be bricks that you could transform into a fire pit for your garden. That could be food that can be then transformed into a raised bed for your garden. It could be so many materials. It's all about creativity and like thinking out of the box and trying to understand how to reuse these materials and give them new value.
That's very good. Thank you. So the other important topic you discussed online is how to reduce our food waste and why it is important. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so I believe that food waste, in my opinion, it's the result of a broken food system. What I mean is, um, it's something that came up in the modern society. Because if we think, for example, about like our grandparents, they didn't have any issue with food waste. They always found different ways to use, for example, every single part of a plant, or use extend the shelf life of food. So in a way or another, they always found ways to not have any sort of food waste, either even with a compost or something else to reuse the materials. Nowadays, I think there is a lack of knowledge and education with people. So in how to preserve food, or how to use every part of a plant, how to reduce this food waste that then contributes to the amount of carbon dioxide, because it gets released in landfills and it produces green gases, which are even worse than carbon dioxide itself. So I believe that it's an essential thing, if you are a gardener or even if you're not, to just learn about reducing your food waste and do things more in line with nature.
And what happens if we reduce food waste?
So, well, if you reduce food waste, you basically so how many times like people end up like buying things from the supermarket, and then you find something at the back of your fridge and you're like, oh no, now it's gone. I need to chuck it away, right? But instead, if you find a way to, like whenever you buy food, you understand ways of like extending their life, or to preserve them in some ways, you're going to end up saving money. You're going to end up being more healthy because, for example, fermenting food, it develops probiotics that are really good for your gut system. But yeah, that's, I think it's more than enough reasons like why you should, reduce your food waste. And there are so many more.
And so the question would be like, if we had food waste, we still would end up with some food. There's always something in the fridge that you forget and you need to chuck it into the bin. So what the best way to achieve it when you're in a city and if you have a garden, let's say, or is there any other way like, I know you mentioned the about reducing it, but what would you have some tips how do you do that in your household, for example?
Yeah. That's a great question, actually. Like what I do, it's super simple, so nothing overcomplicated. Again, like simple is much better. So the first tip that I could give is to source food from local suppliers. That could be a zero waste shop, farmers market. The reason is, first of all, there is no packaging. So packaging every time ends up like being chucked away and is wasted. But and most people think that like zero waste shops are more expensive than a normal shop, but they're not. And actually, like your pantry is gonna look much better. You're gonna have all these jars filled in with grains and flour and so many things that you can use. Um, the second tip that I highly suggest is to learn how to preserve and extend the life of food that you buy. So one of the things that I learned over the years is pickling, fermenting, but also little things that like whenever I go to the supermarket and if I end up buying some herbs which I'm growing in my garden, but still if I end up like getting some from the supermarket, I'm gonna try to place them in a glass of water or in a bag like with like some sort of humidity, so it extends, you know, the life of these things that we buy. So it's super easy to learn about fermentation and pickling as well. People think that it's like something like the only our grandmother used to know, and like it's some sort of lost recipes, but it's just about like rediscovering this lost knowledge and applying it like whenever we go to buy our own food. And another thing would be composting. This is the third and last tip that I would give. Composting is super easy. It doesn't smell, so you can do it even on your balcony or your terrace. And you could do it even indoor with a bokashi system, for example, using bokashi grain, inoculating with microorganisms. You can break down this food and it doesn't smell at all. The only smell that you're going to have is whenever you open it, and probably it's going to smell like fermented. So yeah, these are 3 simple and easy tips that I would suggest to people to apply to their routine.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Alessandro. I personally learned so much from you. I'm a huge fan. So I'm very grateful to meet you and to be able to talk to you today. And definitely going to follow you online. And I wish you all the best. So on to you, Emma, for the questions that the audience might have. Thank you.
Olympia, thank you very much. Alessandro, great stuff. We've got some questions I'm going to try and fly through as much as we can. One person asking, what do you suggest to people who don't have an outside space? What should they do?
Well, I showed in a few videos like how to create like your own indoor garden. So that could be microgreens, for example, that can be grown on a windowsill, and they are a source of nutrients, like they're jam-packed with nutrients. And they take literally like the space of a tray, and you can grow them on a windowsill. Or you could grow herbs. You could have your unlimited supply of herbs if you simply like cut the stem, place it in water, and it's going to root again, and you can transplant it. And another thing that you could grow, it's mushrooms. They're super easy to grow. They come in kit, or you can sterilize your own substrate. And you can grow them indoor. They're highly productive, and they're a great source of food, vitamins, and minerals.
Okay, fantastic. And what is your favourite plant to grow, Alessandro?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I would say all of them, but I can't. So it's probably chilies. Like I started with those. I did a whole garden in the past of just chilies. And yeah, I love all the different colors and varieties and how spicy and mild they can get. It's such a versatile plant, even in the kitchen.
Maybe that's where you get your nickname from, is it? The spicy moustache, I'm sure. And one last question. What's an easy thing to grow if you're starting off fruit and veg? I know chilies are pretty easy as well, aren't they? But what else would you recommend?
So like you said, chilies are a super easy plant, but also I would suggest to grow tomatoes and courgettes, herbs. They're super productive, so really rewarding. Whenever you plant them, they're really resilient plants. So even if you have some sort of disease, they usually get through it and they get to production. And they're gonna, you know, pump up your confidence. And so for the next season, you will be able to plant even more things and learn new things.
Okay, Alessandro, thank you so much. You have been very inspirational. And I have a small 5-year-old son, and he's obsessed now with tomatoes because we spent all summer growing them. And I think it's great, isn't it, when you get little kids seeing something that grows. It's amazing. Alessandro, pleasure. Thank you so much. Olympia, thank you too. And of